What are just like a couple tidbits you would give clients to say, watch for this, do this. This is some good ways to protect yourself because it is their biggest investment most people are making in their life.
Yeah. The first would be always try and get a home inspection.
I'm excited to bring you another episode of Ryan Out Loud. We got Colin McElrea here from George Murray Shipley Bell. He's a local rock star lawyer in town, and he's going to answer a lot of the questions you guys have when purchasing a home. So just before we get started, just a quick legal disclaimer. This by no means is considered legal advice. It's just some general knowledge from a practicing rock star lawyer like Colin here in Sarnia. Always seek your own legal counsel or advice when dealing with your own situation. Now, after that's out of the way, Colin, let's get started. So a client has purchased a home. They've waived their conditions. They've agreed to do it. I've sent all the paperwork over to your office. Now, what does the lawyer do? Like the clients always ask, when do I contact my lawyer? What do they do next? What are they doing in the background while waiting for my home to close?
Yeah. So what we're going to start out by doing is, of course, reaching out to the client, getting the information about their purchase. Are they getting a mortgage? If they are getting a mortgage, who's that going to be with?
Okay.
From there, we're then going to be waiting on receiving mortgage instructions from the lender. Right?
Okay.
That's a big part of our task. In the interim, while we're waiting on those instructions, we're going to start searching the title to the property, getting a tax certificate to make sure that the taxes.
I just want to stop you right there for a second. Searching the title on the property. So what does that involve, searching title on the property? Why do you do that? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah. So what we're trying to determine is, are you going to get good legal title to the piece of property that you are purchasing? And what I mean by that is, what is the legal description of that piece of land that you are going to be buying? We want to make sure that that piece of land is good and not going to be, contended by other people, and also that it's not subject to any forms of encumbrances, liens, mortgages, rights of way, anything else that might be registered on there, which would form a cloud against the title that you are going to be getting.
So talking about the liens, so a lien would be an example. Say they had the roof done, they didn't pay the bill, the contractor would lien the property, or maybe property taxes weren't paid. Those are the kind of liens we're watching out for.
Lots of different types of liens. You could have, property tax liens. You could have construction liens, like you've mentioned, where, a contractor was unpaid, property taxes were unpaid.
Okay.
Perhaps CRA, the seller has some sort of lien against them. The seller could also be subject to some form of a lawsuit where they have lost and they are now subject to payment on that front. Other things might be a lien. Say there's a hot water tank or a furnace that they haven't paid for. That's going to form a lien.
So like a rental furnace, hot water tank, those are going to show up on the title search.
Yeah, or partially financed ones. Usually the rental won't show up on there, but the financed ones will.
Okay, great. So I interrupt you there, but you're kind of in the flow. You're searching title. What's next? The next step for you in the client's purchase journey?
Yeah. Typically, the next step for us is going to be receiving the mortgage instructions from their lending institution and then putting together the mortgage pursuant to the instructions that we received from their bank.
Okay.
At that point in time, we're going to then be preparing the purchase documentation. As long as title was good, we also will be requisitioning the seller's lawyer to make sure that if there are any issues with the title, they correct those issues. That way, when our client takes ownership, everything is good and clean.
So the mortgage instructions you're getting from the bank, you're kind of laying out for the client, the buyer, to sign with you everything that they're getting for the mortgage. So that you're going to go over their rate, their term, the down payment terms, everything they kind of got approved with. You're going to go over it with them one more time, essentially, and make sure this is what you've signed up for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And typically when they meet with us, it's going to take at least an hour to sit down and go over everything.
Yeah.
That means reviewing their title, signing all of their purchase documentation, including their mortgage financing. Yeah. And if it takes longer and we need to sit down and explain to them how that process is going to work, we do that.
And then normally, like, clients are always, they buy the house, they purchase it, and they're like, I need to meet my lawyer tomorrow. And the closing date is not for like 3 months away sometimes, right? So typically, in a perfect world scenario, when do you like to meet with a client to sign off before the closing date? Like, how soon before the closing date?
I like to meet with them typically a week before closing.
Okay.
Oftentimes we're not getting mortgage instructions until closer than that.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it is maybe a day or two before closing when we're meeting with them.
Yeah.
I personally prefer if we have an opportunity to do it in advance of
Yep.
that. That way, if there are other issues, it's easier for us to work those problems out if needed.
But I guess the main thing I'm trying, so they don't need to meet with you 3 months before, because it's not relevant, right? Because the title search date's not up yet. You haven't got mortgage instructions. You really, if you just met them, be like, "Hi, I'm Colin." That's it, and
Yeah.
there's not really much to go over with.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if they do come in for that, I'm
Yeah.
always happy to meet
Yeah.
with clients at that point in time, but it's very much so a preliminary meeting. I'll be getting some information. A lot of the times I can get that same information over the phone or via email, but sometimes clients do want to come in and discuss things, especially clients who are perhaps first-time home buyers and aren't as experienced with the process. I'm always happy to sit down with them, be it after they've signed an agreement of purchase and sale or even before when they're shopping with their realtor.
So at this point here, they've come in, they've signed everything, they're ready to purchase the home, we're ready for closing date. What's the next steps you're doing after they signed off? Like, what are the couple things that are done, to get the home into their name, and last checks maybe you're doing, and stuff like that? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So on the day of closing, what's going to be happening is we're going to be waiting on their lending institution to transfer us their mortgage funds.
Yep.
Typically, our client's also going to be bringing in their down payment at least the morning of closing, but typically a day before or so. That way we have all the funds needed to purchase their property. At that point in time, those funds are in our trust account, and we're going to requisition certified funds, a big check essentially,
Yeah.
payable to the seller's lawyer.
Is it like a big cardboard one?
I wish it was.
No. Okay.
No, it's not nearly as grand and fun as you'd make it sound, but we do actually get a check. That check gets deposited into the seller's lawyer's trust account,
Okay.
at which point in time we provide them with a deposit slip. The seller's lawyer then will go into the online land titles registry system, which is where all the property in the province of Ontario is registered. The seller's lawyer will then release that deed in that system, and I, as the purchaser's lawyer, will then go in and register that transfer as well as perhaps their mortgage onto the title to the property, which transfers ownership of the property. And at that point in time, we've officially closed the transaction.
So it's party time. It's congratulations. They own a house. They get the keys. They get to move in. So you mentioned them bringing in a check for their down payment, but in that down payment check, there's also going to be other fees too, right? So, just to name a couple, I think is title insurance will be one. That's a requirement. We'll touch on that in a minute. There's like disbursements and other fees, but kind of break down what other fees would be involved in that.
Yeah. So in that, the check that they're going to be bringing in, they're going to be bringing their down payment for their house. In the event that they have used a mortgage where they've had a down payment of less than 20%, they're also going to be subject to what they call CMHC, mortgage default insurance.
Okay.
They're usually going to roll that into the mortgage, but sometimes the tax on that CMHC is in addition to that.
Okay.
So sometimes there will be some money that they need to bring in for that. In addition to that, they're also typically going to have to bring in, if they're subject to it, the Ontario Provincial Land Transfer Tax. So anytime you purchase a property in the province of Ontario, you are subject to a tax. And that tax is actually doubled if you're buying in the GTA, where they also have a municipal land transfer
Thank
tax.
goodness for Sarnia.
The good news is if you're a first-time home buyer, you are entitled to a rebate on that land transfer tax up to a certain amount.
So here's a question I get from people all the time. What qualifies them for the rebate? Let's say this scenario, right? Me and my girlfriend are buying a house together. I've owned a house before. Girlfriend's never owned a house before. It's her first house.
Yeah.
How would that work?
So what will happen is it's going to come down to whether or not the two individuals are spouses, okay? So in the event that one of the two is a first-time home buyer and the other is not, but they are spouses under the definition in the Act, which can include potentially common law spouses, then in that situation, the spouse that is the first-time home buyer, if they've been living with their spouse who is not, they would perhaps not qualify. However, if it was just a boyfriend and girlfriend situation, they're not considered to be
Girlfriend's
common law
moving out of
spouses.
mom and dad's house.
Girlfriend's moving
Okay.
out of mom and dad's house. She is a first-time home buyer. In that situation, she's going to qualify for a provincial land transfer tax rebate. And at that point in time, she is going to get at least half if the both of them are going
So
on
at
title.
least half. Okay, perfect. So in those fees, we talked about title insurance. What is title insurance? What's it cover? What does it not cover? Give us like the Coles notes of title insurance.
That's a great question. And you know what? It's very common because clients come in and they oftentimes hear it, it is expensive. It's typically somewhere in the area of $400 to $500. But the good news is it's actually a cheaper alternative to the alternative, which is getting a survey of the land. Anytime you're going to get a survey of a property, it's going to be a lot more than
$800, $1,200, more depending on where it is and information. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. The big issue is when we're searching the title to a property, I can see the legal description of that land. However, I'm not able to tell the on the ground situation.
You guys don't go and measure?
That's what I mean. So I can't tell you if your neighbor's built a deck that's now encroaching onto your property and, taking up a big chunk of your backyard, because I can't see that. That doesn't show up on legal title. However, a title insurance policy is an insurance policy that's going to step in and indemnify the buyer in the event that some sort of adverse matter was discovered on an up-to-date survey.
So dumb that down into English for the people that don't have a law degree, I guess. What's that mean?
It's going to mean that it's going to make sure that the title that you are getting is clean from an on-the-ground perspective rather than getting an up-to-date survey.
So say I get the house, my deck is on the neighbor's property, the house I bought.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to understand if the neighbor's deck was on yours, but if your deck was onto the neighbor's property, the neighbor went out and got a survey and discovered that your deck was actually on his property, well, in that instance, he's going to have the right to tell you to tear that down. And you're going to say, well, that's going to cost me a whole lot of money, and I'm also going to want to replace what I've got over on my side of things. At that point, you're going to be looking to your title insurance company.
So they'll come in and cover the cost or part of the cost. They'll maybe a deductible. We're not title insurance reps, but the grand scheme of things, it will help you cover the cost.
The grand scheme of things, they're looking to cover some of those issues for you. They'll also look to cover things like fraud against the title. So if somebody's out there pretending to be Sean Ryan, and he's going to say, you know what, I own Sean Ryan's house, and I'm just going to transfer that over to my friend Bob. Well, in that instance, they're going to step in and indemnify you. You're also going to be looking to the police to charge them, but
stop pretending to be me, Colin. So the other question is, we talked about the title search and like liens and taxes and stuff like that. For somehow, let's say a buyer takes possession of the house and an old lien gets put on there from the past seller. Would the title insurance help there at all?
Yeah, typically we would discover that sort of thing going on. One of the things that you see very common is that upon the sale of the property, the previous owner doesn't pay their final bill, which often doesn't go to them until after the deal has closed. They fail to pay that, say it's a hydro bill. That hydro bill then, hydro comes back, they want to get paid for that.
Obviously.
It forms a lien against the title to the property. We would try and get payment from the previous owner, but oftentimes they're gone and they're not interested in trying to help out. So at that point, we're looking to title insurance to step in and pay the costs associated with that.
And then, so what's the amount of time you guys need to complete a purchase? So can I buy a house and close it tomorrow?
Probably not.
Okay.
If you were buying it cash and I was able to pull that off, there's a slim chance I'd be able to do it. But if you're getting a mortgage or you're doing anything else, we need some time. And so do your lender. And
so what's the normal amount of time that you like to see given to make sure everything's done properly, nothing gets missed, and everyone's good? Ideally,
a month to 3 weeks is fabulous.
Okay.
Oftentimes it is sooner than that.
Okay.
And that's fine as well. It's also to make sure that we don't have other things on those days so that we can free up time to work in it, because unfortunately it'd be great if, we could just deal with one file, but oftentimes we'll have a lot of these files on the go at the same time. So we need to kind of get them in order and be able to put people on it to do the work.
Okay, perfect. And then when purchasing a condo, we're always having that status certificate. We're talking about, the health of the condo corp. Kind of walk us through the status certificate, what you're looking for on it, what's the purpose of it.
So the nice thing I like about a condo is that when people are buying a house that is not a condo, they are oftentimes not setting aside money and saving for those rainy day issues. And that's things like, my roof needs to be repaired or my windows need to be replaced. The sad fact is most people aren't saving in preparation for when those times will ultimately come. Whereas with a condo, they do try to the best of their ability by bringing engineers in and creating a fund to prepare for those rainy day payments that they're going to need to make. In addition to that, they also set aside monthly amounts in your monthly condo fees to cover the common costs. And that's things like lawn maintenance or snow removal or the general maintenance and upkeep of the property. Those are all important things. What we're looking to make sure is, are the costs that are being listed out in that status certificate what is anticipated by the buyer? We also want to see anytime a major surprise pops up for a condo, they have two ways of paying for that. And, one I saw recently was, a bat infestation. Well, no one was anticipating that there was going to be a bat problem, no different than if you had a bat problem at your house. But they hadn't budgeted for it, so all of a sudden they needed to find a way to pay for that. And they have two options. They can either increase your monthly common fees and pay for that over a period of time, or they can levy what they call a special assessment. And that's a one-time payment where they collect it from all of the owners in the condo to pay these sort of unexpected expenses.
The bat institution.
The bat, yeah. So what we're always trying to see is, have they levied any special assessments? So is our client going to get stuck with a big bill? Have they increased, or are they anticipating an increase to those monthly common expenses? At the end of the day, what we're trying to see is there any unexpected expenses for our client, right? In addition to that, we're also looking, is there perhaps any lawsuits levied against the condo corporation, which again are going to potentially lead to costs for our client. Mm-hmm. We're also looking to make sure that the rules and regulations and bylaws of the condo are rules and regulations that our client can live with. And that's things like perhaps there's rules about where you can have a deck or where you can keep a dog or those sorts of things. That's all important information for our client. And sometimes it's going to impact their lifestyle.
So just to kind of highlight, you're looking at the financial well-being of the condo corp and legal litigation is probably some of the main points, or
those are definitely the big ones that I'm always looking at. But we're also looking at the rules. We're also looking at how many of the units are leased out. That may be important to a client. All of those things are usually included in there, and it gives our client an opportunity to view the condo corporation as a whole, so that they know if they want to become a part of that unit.
Wow. And when you got that call for a bat, were you like, are you guys kidding? Or was it like, because that's like, we don't hear about that too often, right?
No.
Yeah.
For my side of it, I just saw it in a status certificate where they had levied a special assessment, and I wondered what it is. So I often will reach out to the property manager to find out,
what's going on.
And these are the sorts of things you hear. You hear a lot of crazy ones, but that's because they're things that they're not anticipating. No different than people who own a house, and oftentimes they have things they're not anticipating.
Like, we have guano everywhere. So another thing too. So what is some steps a buyer can take to protect themselves when purchasing any kind of real estate, like a house or a condo? What are just like a couple tidbits you would give clients to say, watch for this, do this. This is some good ways to protect yourself, because it is their biggest investment most people are making in their life.
Yeah. The first would be always try and get a home inspection. Get somebody who's qualified to go through the property and try to determine if there's going to be any major issues. That can come back to bite you real quick if it turns out that there's some sort of structural problems or things like that. That's not something that a lawyer's ever going to be able to discover in a legal search. That's an on-the-ground.
You don't do home inspections?
That's unfortunate, isn't it? Secondly, I always suggest making sure you do a final walkthrough before closing. And that's when you're going to find out if there's anything that they've, destroyed prior to moving out, if they've left a whole bunch of garbage at the property. These are all things that if we find it out before we close the transaction, then we can work with the seller's lawyer to try and arrange for those problems to be fixed.
And I had that happen to me last year. It might have been a deal you and I were doing. I can't remember, but we did a final walkthrough a couple of days before closing. The house was vacant, south, and someone came and stole the copper.
Yeah.
And if the buyer closed the house, it would have been tough, right? But they end up getting it rectified before closing. It made sense for everyone to go forward. But 100% the final walkthrough, we do them 99% of the time, if not all the time, for our clients for that reason. So I'm glad you talked about it. So what's another tip?
Prepare well in advance. It's really good to go out, and I'm sure this is more for, realtors maybe to advise, but go out, get pre-approved for a mortgage. Make sure that you know how much you can afford to pay. The last thing we want is the day of closing, it turns out that you don't have sufficient money to cover your down payment.
So is that a common thing you're seeing?
It's not, but it does happen.
Happens.
So I just like to make sure that clients go into it knowing what they're going to have in terms of their
So is that just a lack of education on the buyer's standpoint where they didn't realize kind of the process maybe?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately just one of those situations where they didn't get enough knowledge before getting to that point. And unfortunately, if the deal comes to us, it's 2 weeks to closing. If they've already waived conditions, we're sort of past that point where we can help at that.
So here's a question. Buyer buys a house, can't get the dough, can't close it. What happens?
That's a scary proposition.
Okay.
In the event that does happen and they actually fail to close, the seller is then going to have a duty to mitigate their losses. And what I mean by that is they're going to have to relist that property and try and sell it for as much as they can. Hopefully they're able to get the same or more and they are not out anything. However, in the event that they do suffer a loss, meaning they get less money than what they were going to get from the guy who failed to close the original purchase, well, they're then going to be probably commencing a lawsuit against the individual who failed to purchase the property.
So the buyer not taking the time to educate themselves and not being able to close that deal could cost them quite a bit of money.
It could.
Yeah.
And
okay.
You don't want to end up in a lawsuit.
And speaking of lawsuits, while we're on that subject and mitigating stuff, I've closed a property. Huge issue I find that wasn't disclosed. And what kind of recourse do I have?
The general rule when you're purchasing a property is that of buyer beware. So a property takes, or an owner takes the property subject to general wear and tear. However, in the event that the seller was aware of defects and he intentionally hid those defects from the buyer, that's where a seller could potentially become liable, because at that point they've committed a form of fraud against the buyer and they have misled them and sold them something that is not what they were anticipating.
So an example of that would be like, let's say the basement leaked. And then before I listed the house, I threw a new piece of drywall on it, painted it, and then sold you the house and said, no, foundation's good.
That's a classic example.
Okay.
Right? Guy has a whole bunch of leaks in the basement. Right before closing, he's well aware that there's a water issue. He covers it up with fresh drywall and paint, tells the buyer, no, it was always dry down there. Closes the deal. 2 weeks later, the property floods. The buyer then hears from the neighbors, oh, that house has been flooding all the time. At that point in time, you're going to be looking to commence a lawsuit.
So what's the buyer's recourse? Like, how does that work out normally?
We always start by sending a demand letter out.
Okay.
We find out what the costs are going to be to fix the issue that is in existence.
Get a quote from some contractors.
Get multiple quotes. Find out what that cost is going to be to fix it. At that point in time, we know what we're dealing with. From there, we're going to send out a demand letter. Hopefully, the seller will come good and pay it. In the event that they don't, well, your only recourse at that point in time is to commence a lawsuit and try and recover your losses via the court system.
And then you got to look at kind of weigh the option cost going to court versus cost repairing.
And that's really an unfortunate part. A lot of times people can go to small claims court where they can self-represent. But the truth is, if you get into more expensive litigation, well, at that point, you're hiring a lawyer, and unfortunately, litigation lawyers aren't cheap. So you're going to be incurring costs, and a court order or an actual decision isn't something that happens overnight. There can be a year, 2 years, longer before there's ever actually a decision and money comes back to you if you're successful.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Colin. I think you gave us a lot of great information. Covered a lot here today. So.
We've covered a lot, and you've done a good job of canvassing it with me.
So if someone wants to get a hold of Colin, they're at 222 Front Street North. So that's the old BMO, Bank Montreal building downtown, next Ups and Downs, or 519-336-8770.
That is correct.
That is your phone number. So that's awesome. Thank you very much, Colin, for having you today, dropping some great information for people. Love to have you again, and have a great day.
Thank you, Sean. I'll come back anytime.
Cheers.
Have a great day.